Before I begin, please subscribe to this channel right now. Comment where you're watching from. This story will touch your heart in ways you never expected. What happened to me could happen to anyone. I'm sharing this to protect other families from the nightmare I lived. Stay with me until the end, because this gets worse before it gets better. I'm 80 years old with a memory sharper than most 60-year-olds. My name is Margaret. Everyone calls me Maggie. I spent my entire life as a seamstress, raising for children alone after my husband died in a work accident when I was 32. Those were incredibly hard years, sewing until dawn, accepting any order, stretching every penny to make sure my children didn't go hungry. But I succeeded. I raised for good, hard-working, honest people. They are my pride, my entire life. I was always a strong and independent woman. I cooked, cleaned, sewed, took care of everything myself even after turning 70. My children worried constantly, said I worked too much, that I should rest and enjoy my golden years. But I couldn't stop. Working was my nature, my purpose, the only thing I knew. Until 2 years ago, when my body decided to betray me in the cruelest way possible. I had a stroke while sewing a wedding dress. It was terrifying and sudden. I woke up in the hospital unable to move the right side of my body properly. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive, that the damage could have been much worse. I spent months in physical therapy, learned to walk again with a cane, recovered most of my movements. But I was never the same. I became slow, tired, needing help with basic things like bathing and changing clothes. My children had a family meeting to decide what to do about me. I hate that expression, what to do about me, as if I were a problem to be solved. But I understand their situation. They all worked full-time, had their own families to care for, their own bills to pay. Nobody could drop everything to stay with me all day long. The obvious solution was hiring a professional caregiver. I had my modest retirement savings and some money I'd put away over the years. Not much, but enough to pay for part-time help. My daughter Luciana, the oldest, took responsibility for finding someone qualified. She interviewed several candidates, asked for references, talked to former employers, did everything by the book. That's how Silvana entered my life. She was 45 years old, had proven experience caring for elderly people, and came with impeccable references. During the interview in my living room, she was polite, spoke softly, smiled at all the right times. She said all the perfect things about how elderly people deserved dignity and respect, how caregiving was more than just a job, but a sacred mission. Luciana was impressed by her professionalism. So was I. We hired Silvana to work Monday through Friday, from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. The first few weeks were absolutely, perfectly normal. Silvana arrived punctually every single day, helped me with my bath with patience, prepared my meals exactly how I liked them, gave me my medicines at the correct times, and even sat with me watching television. She was efficient, careful, and seemingly compassionate. My children were so relieved to have found someone trustworthy. But after about a month, something started to change. It was subtle at first, so gradual that it took me a while to notice the disturbing pattern. Silvana began making small, poisonous comments about my children. "Dona Maggie, I saw your daughter leaving the mall with several shopping bags yesterday. Must be so nice to have money to spend like that while you live here with so little. Or your son stopped by briefly today, barely stayed 15 minutes. He must be very busy with much more important things than visiting his own mother." I tried to defend them, explaining that Luciana worked hard for her money, that my son had family responsibilities and a demanding job. But Silvana would just smile in that condescending, understanding way and say, "Of course, Dona Maggie." Of course. As if I were just a naive old woman making pathetic excuses for negligent, ungrateful children. The comments became more frequent and increasingly venomous. When Luciana called, Silvana would roll her eyes dramatically where I could clearly see. When my other children visited, she listened to our conversations with visible disapproval written all over her face. She began telling me that my children only cared about my retirement check, that they were impatiently waiting for me to die so they could sell my house and split the money, that they had dumped me here with a paid caregiver because they couldn't be bothered to deal with me themselves. They abandoned you, Dona Maggie, she would say while roughly combing my hair in a way that hurt my scalp. You gave your entire life for them, and now you're just an inconvenient burden they want to forget about. But don't worry, I'm here. I'm the only one who really, truly cares about you. I tried desperately not to believe her cruel words. I knew my children, knew they loved me deeply. But when you hear something repeated constantly, when you're vulnerable and completely dependent on others, the seeds of doubt begin to take root and grow. I started noticing small things that seemed to confirm what she was saying. Luciana really was visiting less frequently. My youngest son always seemed to be in a terrible hurry. Phone conversations were getting shorter and more distant. Was Silvana actually right? Was I truly just a burden nobody wanted? Silvana noticed my growing insecurity and fear, and she intensified her psychological attacks mercilessly. She began controlling all my phone calls. When the phone rang, she would answer first, every single time. Dona Maggie is sleeping right now, she'd say even when I was wide awake. Dona Maggie isn't feeling well enough to talk today. When I protested, she claimed she was protecting me from stress. You get so agitated after phone calls, Dona Maggie. It's terrible for your blood pressure. I'm just looking out for your health. She started inventing horrible things my children supposedly said about me. Luciana asked me yesterday how much time you probably have left. She wants to know if it's really worth continuing to pay for your expensive treatments and medications. Or your son told me you're becoming increasingly senile, that you don't even know what you're saying anymore, that it's getting embarrassing. They were vicious, calculated lies designed to destroy me, but I was so confused and isolated that I began questioning my own perception of reality. Was I really losing my mind? Were my children really saying these terrible things behind my back? The isolation grew steadily worse. Silvana began convincing me to cancel family visits. You're far too tired to receive people today, Dona Maggie. You desperately need to rest. When I insisted that I wanted to see my children, she would sigh dramatically and loudly. Fine, but don't you dare complain later that you're completely exhausted. I warned you this would happen. And after visits, she would be coldly silent, visibly irritated, doing her tasks with deliberately rough and unnecessarily noisy movements, clearly punishing me for having defied her controlling recommendations. I became genuinely afraid to contradict her about anything. She never physically hit me, never raised her voice or yelled, but there was a systematic psychological cruelty in her methods that was equally devastating and destructive. She would deliberately delay my bath for hours until I was desperate and uncomfortable. She prepared food she knew perfectly well I disliked, and then pretended shocked surprise when I refused to eat it. Oh my, Dona Maggie, you're so incredibly difficult lately. Nothing pleases you anymore. You're impossible to satisfy. The absolute worst was when she made me feel like I was genuinely losing my sanity. I was completely certain I had left my reading glasses on the nightstand, but she insisted firmly that I had put them somewhere else entirely. Your memory is getting so much worse, Dona Maggie. It's honestly sad and depressing to watch you deteriorate like this. Small personal items would mysteriously disappear and then inexplicably reappear days later. My precious wedding ring vanished for 3 agonizing days and then was suddenly back in my jewelry box. It was always right there, Dona Maggie. You simply forgot. Your mind is going. I was becoming severely depressed, constantly anxious, and frightened inside my own house. I began to genuinely believe I really was losing my mind, that I was becoming an impossible burden nobody could handle. I stopped calling my children because I didn't want to bother them with my problems. When they called me, I kept conversations painfully short because Silvana was always hovering nearby, listening intently, evaluating every word, silently judging everything. I began to deeply fear her venomous comments that would